So my name is Nancy Kelley, and I attended Manchester Community College from 1980 to 1982.
1980 to 82. So give us some background as far as where you were from originally, where you went to school, high school, before you got to MCC.
So I grew up in Manchester, and I went to East Catholic High School, and I got married very young, so I was 18, I guess, and had 3 children by the time I was 19. And interestingly enough, I had run a small business out of my home while my children were young. And I was used to being pretty independent, making a fair amount of money. So when they started school themselves, I wanted to be home at night, which is when I was usually out. And wasn't trained to do anything, so decided that instead of just trying to find another job during the day, I would go back to school and get a degree in accounting, with the idea that someday I might become a tax lawyer at UConn.
Okay. And then what made you choose MCC as far as where to get your start?
It was around the corner from my house, and it was inexpensive and just very accessible.
Okay. Now, when you were here, the East Campus was still part of the campus. So you
Yes.
had some classes at the East Campus, as well as, were you here when the Low Building opened then?
None of this was here.
None of this, but
Nothing.
the Low Building?
Hartford Road
Right.
and the temporary campus down there was here. So I used to commute back and forth between them when I started.
And you graduated from MCC in what year?
82.
82. So the Low Building opened in 84, so you weren't even
Right.
part of the Low Building.
Yeah.
Okay. So after MCC, where did you go from MCC as far as education?
Well, I was at MCC. Had a lot of fun and a lot of excitement on the campus. I ran for Student Senate at that time. At the federal level, the Pell Grant program was being cut back, which was, in my view, at that time, endangering the opportunity for a lot of students to be able to come and support their families by getting a better education. And so we in the Student Senate organized the campus and went to Washington and made our voices heard, and held a financial aid awareness day where I think 300 people attended, and we more than 300 because I think we registered almost 300 people to vote that day. And so when I graduated as valedictorian, I was given a Truman Scholarship, which meant that I could afford to go anywhere I wanted to. And so I applied to a number of schools in Connecticut because I would have to commute, given that I had 3 children. And Yale took me. And so that's where I went after I left MCC.
Okay. So give us some impression about some of the programs, activities, and events as part of the Student Senate that you were involved in. Any others besides that financial aid awareness program?
Well, I mean, the Student Senate was kind of very active back then, so we were really involved in a lot of different activities on campus. And the thing that I remember most about my education at MCC was that not only did it, have lots of different kinds of people in the classroom, so you learned from all kinds of people, but also I was introduced to ideas here that I never thought about before. And I remember one of them in particular in Bill Dowd's political science class. And it was about a theory of the revolution, and that the revolution really wasn't about liberty at all. It was about kind of the moneyed class seeking to deny political power to people who didn't own land or who were in debt for some reason. And I thought this was really quite a revolutionary idea. And it turns out that it's a very, strong strain of history in the United States. But I was just introduced to it then. And there's so many things like that happened at Manchester Community College.
You mentioned Bill Dowd. Are any other faculty members in your some of those early classes that you attended that call some
Yeah.
memories?
I have to say that there were so many people here that made such a critical difference in my life. I think probably the person who made the biggest difference was Harry Mizell. He was the Dean of Student Affairs at the time, and really supported my efforts while I was here. And at one point sat me down in his office and said, Nancy, you should really think about going on and doing something that's big, because you can do it. And he said, I've been to Washington, I've worked with those people, I've seen Robert Kennedy, you can do this. And, I mean, no one had ever told me anything like that before in my life. I would have never applied for the Truman Scholarship if he hadn't encouraged me. And it turned out that after Yale, I went to Harvard for 4 years, and then I did go to work in the White House. So, you know, he was instrumental in that. And then there was Mohammed Zaire, who taught economics, and he wrote in support of my application to the Truman Scholarship as well as to Yale. Marianne Hanley, who was kind of a coach to kind of get ready for the Truman Scholarship. I'm trying to remember my speech professor's name.
Bob Richardson?
Yeah, you know, that rings a bell, Bob Richardson. And I remember standing up in front of his class doing things like changing diapers and on a doll as part of my public speech, you know. It was all quite funny looking back, but it was instrumental in building confidence and just broadening my horizons.
Yeah. Let me take you back to the first class you attended at MCC. So think about that first experience, walking into that classroom for the first time. What was that like? Do you remember anything about it that sticks out in your mind?
Oh, goodness, you know. I don't remember my first class at MCC.
Right.
Yeah.
Were you nervous about attending classes in general?
I was. You know, I didn't know where this was all going to lead me. I would essentially drop my kids off at nursery school and kindergarten before I went to school, and then I would come here and take my classes and then get done about 12 or 1 in the afternoon and then go pick them up and run around with them all day, and then at night, late, start my own homework. That's what I most remember about here. It was so mixed up with my family life. It was hard to kind of unravel individually at that point.
What was your interaction with and your experience with other students in the classroom? How did you feel about the age mix, the age differences? I'm sure there were different age groups in the classroom. How did that affect you in terms of your confidence in the classroom?
You know, it was really interesting when I got to Harvard, people used to ask me about the community college all the time, and I said, listen, I learned just as much at the community college as I learned at Harvard. They're just different lessons. And one of the lessons was because you were in classrooms with people that were so diverse, so, you know, war veterans and elderly women and younger women going back to school and trying to get a diploma to support their families. Everybody had a different perspective and different point of view. You know, there was history that some people remembered that others had never been introduced to before, and that you know, that kind of diverse experience and debate and discussion was something that was really different than at any of the other schools I attended.
If you were to be advising a potential student, someone thinking about going to college, how would you advise them in terms of recommending Manchester Community College or another community college in general?
Well, I've always been a big supporter of community colleges, and I wrote the Truman Scholarship. My essay was the case for the community colleges, and when I gave my valedictory speech, I told people how important the community college was, that this represented opportunity for so many people in this country that didn't have it. And in some sense, we're back right where we were then today. And colleges like this play even more an important role than they did when I went through, because due to dire economic circumstances, many people no longer have the resources to access four-year colleges, especially with the increase in tuition. And they can access the community college, and you can go on anywhere from here. That's what I learned.
That's great. Think about, or can you tell us about maybe some funny experiences that you had here? Anything that happened that was maybe not so funny at the time, but looking back at it, it was pretty funny?
Let's see. Let me see if I can remember. There was lots that was funny that happened here. I made some great friends here, and we had a good time together, especially working in the Student Senate. I think one of the interesting things was when I was campaigning for the Student Senate. I remember campaigning on Hartford Road. We were on the corner, and my three girls, who were about this tall then, had leaflets, and they were running up and down the street in front of the campus saying, "Vote for my mother, vote for my mother." And that was fun. That's a memory that has always stuck with me. Yeah. And then when my ex-husband graduated from Manchester Community College, I remember one of our daughters looking at him through the binoculars, and I wonder what an impact seeing both of their parents going through a college like this had on them at such a young age, because they've all gone on to great educational and professional careers. But I think that was one of the most meaningful, if not funny, experiences.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Who were the faculty advisors and any faculty involved with, or staff involved with the Student Senate as advisors that you can remember and tell us something about? Who was involved in?
Well, you were. You were. Chuck Please was. Yeah, I mean, Marianne Hanley, there was a whole handful of people that were intensely involved and committed to seeing the Student Senate become a body that was active and representative of the students, and that would get them engaged and bring them together around different activities. So I was looking through my scrapbook, as I said, and I have letters from you, and I have letters from Chuck and from Marianne and from Mohammed Zaire, from Harry, all encouraging me.
How would you say the level of student involvement in general was in terms of student activities, Student Senate, kind of the outside the classroom education? Was there a lot of involvement then?
I don't know how much there was before I came on campus, but when I came on campus, we certainly organized it. Right. So not only did people participate in the Student Senate and its meetings, but we organized a trip to Washington with 60 students, I think, a bus trip to participate in a national campaign to lobby our congressman on behalf of standing firm against funding cuts for community colleges as well as financial aid. That trip was full. And then, as I said, we had this Financial Awareness Day where we organized everyone. We also had a very strong legislative intern program, and I was an intern at the state legislature for a year. And I worked for State Representative Dean Markham, who's become a lifelong friend to me and mentor. And I learned a lot about the political process that way, and certainly that program was packed. I mean, there was no extra seats at the table for students who wanted to get in.
And that legislative internship program that was run through which department? A faculty member, remember? Was that Angelo Masori?
You know what? I met Angelo Masori when I was at Yale. That was the first time I met him, yeah. And it was funny because when I was at Yale, I think we were in a political economy class together, or he was teaching the sections of it. And I started telling him about my experience at the community college, and at this college in particular. And knowing his commitment to social justice, I really encouraged him to broaden, the places that he looked at where he could really make a difference. And then a couple of years later, I came back here to visit, and there he was teaching. Right. It was so funny.
I think
so
he was
no,
a grad assistant at Yale teaching part of the course.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, so that he was here with the legislative intern.
When he came here, he took over the legislative.
Okay, he was not doing it while I was here, but I did meet him while he was at Yale.
He credits you for his coming here.
Right.
And one of the tapes he did a good job.
He does.
Yeah.
I have some of your...
I'm just trying to remember who was that faculty member before Angelo.
Was it
doing the internship program?
Steve Casano?
No, it wasn't
He was
Steve.
doing voluntary action.
Yeah.
Who? Bill Dowd?
Could have been Bill Dowd or Marianne Hanley.
Marianne, maybe,
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
No, you let that whole issue about the White House slip by so fast.
Yeah.
Can you back up and tell us what happened exactly? What do you mean you were at the White House? I was at the White House, but I don't think it was the same thing.
So I went to, if you want me to start at the beginning, I'm happy to do that. So I was one of the first community college grads that had ever transferred to Yale. And they were wonderful. They took all of my credits, and to accept the Truman Scholarship, I needed to matriculate as a junior. But I wasn't ready to go and major in economics at Yale as a junior. I, had basically a very fundamental calculus class, and that was it. And so I really struggled there my first semester, really struggled very hard. And I was fortunate enough to have an advisor named Richard Murnane, who was a professor in economics, and he had a stuttering problem. And he understood what it was like to be at Yale and not belong there because you had something different about you. For me, it was 3 kids and a community college background, and for him, it was a stuttering problem. So he basically said that he would take me on and coach me or tutor me if I took his midterm economics exam and passed it. So I never studied anything so hard in all my life, and I ended up getting 101 on that exam. And so he took me on, and I dropped out of all of the senior level economics classes, and I dropped back to introductory classes, and he taught me calculus and taught me all of the introductory concepts that I needed. And ultimately, I did well enough there to graduate in the top 10% of my class with a degree in economics. And then it was time to apply to law school. And so I did apply to several law schools and to Harvard as well, and to the Kennedy School of Government. And so I did a joint degree there. I was accepted at both schools. And I ran a research program at Harvard for 4 years that looked at economic dislocation where communities were dependent on one industry, like steel, or furniture manufacturing, or textiles. And there was several case studies and a book and a national conference written on all of this. And to make a long story short, people started to encourage me to apply for the White House Fellowship. And I was a long shot because I was young and had not done a lot professionally yet, although, I had taught while I was at Harvard and I had run this research program. Most of the people who do the White House Fellowship are mid-career people. But I applied, and I went through what was a very rigorous acceptance process, and they took me. And I remember at the last, there's a series of 3 major trials that I call them that you have to go through. So the first thing is like a 35-page application. The second thing is what they call regional interviews, where you interviewed at the regional finals by a panel of prior White House fellows and also public officials. And then the third is you go to Washington for 3 days, and the National Commission on White House Fellowship interviews you, and it's assigned seating, and it's all kinds of stuff. And so they basically said to me, I remember this particularly, they said, you don't have a lot of experience, and why should we take you? And I said, you should take me because I'm ready to go right now, and if you don't, I'm not coming back. A lot of applicants apply more than once. I said, I'm not coming back. I'll find a way to do what I need to do some other way. So you should take me because you can get me now. And they took me. So I commuted back and forth to Washington. It was a very, very difficult year for me because my children stayed. They were in 7th and 8th grade at the time. And I came home on the weekends, and I worked as a special assistant to the United States Trade Representative in the White House. I traveled all over the world, participated in intellectual property negotiations in Geneva. I went to multilateral trade negotiations in Canada. It was just tremendous. Couldn't believe that I was actually there, having access to that kind of firsthand knowledge of how public and private decision-making gets done at that level.
Okay, thank you. Any other experiences that you think would be worth sharing with us as far as your stay at MCC?
I think the one thing, this college has not been just transformative for me. It has been transformative for my entire family. And I'll start with my mother. I know you interviewed her last week.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, she was pursuing 2 degrees here. And that was extremely important for her because she had been in a job where women weren't appreciated at a large insurance company, and no matter how hard she worked or what the quality of her work was, she could not seem to get the attention and the promotions that she deserved. And so coming back to this college and beginning at, I think she might have been late 30s or early 40s then, never believing that she would have an education, and then acquiring the skills to start her own business in real estate and becoming just a hugely successful force in Manchester in real estate and in politics. And then becoming, the president of the Alumni Association for 12 years and starting a lot of programs for the college that hadn't been started before. So my mother, this transformed her life. She traveled all over the world to China and, Europe and places she would have never dreamed of going if it wasn't for the programs. Not the academic programs here, but the extracurricular activities. And so, she set the standard. And all 3 of my sisters attended classes here. None of them got degrees, but it all got us a start, which is where it matters.
Were they here before you or after your sisters?
I think my older sister was here before. My 2 younger sisters might have been here after. Mm-hmm. So.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Can you talk about what you're doing now, Nancy?
So I have had a very, very unusual career in that I have practiced law, been a partner in a big law firm. I have worked with startup companies. I have worked in the nonprofit sector. But mostly throughout all of that, I've worked in real estate development. Through all of that, I have worked in science and healthcare. That's, so in my practice of law, a professor from Harvard or MIT would walk out of those schools with a patent or a license, and we would help to build a company around it. So we negotiated their intellectual property rights, we negotiated their venture capital agreements, we negotiated their employment, the management team, their strategic partnerships with large pharmaceuticals. If they were successful, they grew up and went public. We took them public. And my job as a lawyer was to sit with the scientists and understand what they were doing so that I can write it in English for the investing public so they could buy the securities. And it was a tremendous education, not only scientific education, but it was also an education about what makes companies grow and develop and how jobs are created. And so when I was at the law firm, I also was appointed to the board of the Jackson Laboratory, which is a large scientific institution in Bar Harbor, Maine, and also to the board of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, which is a Harvard teaching hospital. So I got kind of the scientific side and the healthcare side together with the viewpoint of working inside large institutions that were growing, as well as having the experience of small companies that were also growing. So in my early years, I worked with the companies that became big, the Genzymes and the Genetics Institutes and the Biogens of the world, which are now huge. They were startups back then. And from there, I left the law and I went out and started raising money for and running startup companies, assisting them operationally, because I found that rather than just advising them, I would much rather be part of the operational team that was building something of value. And then about 8 years ago, I guess in 2002, I think, or 2000, I was recruited by a large real estate firm to start their life sciences practice. And I had just finished pro bono a very large real estate transaction for my hometown. And it had taken us 3 years to get it done. It was very fractious within the town, but we got an agreement. It ultimately was approved by 98% of all the elected bodies in town. We brought the town $80 million in new benefits. And so I had hired a real estate consulting firm to assist us in that effort. When I finished, they asked me if I would come to work for them, and I said, no, I don't do real estate, I do science. But then I went and wrote their business plan, and I realized that this was a large and growing market. Technologically, the real estate product was very sophisticated and very different than your normal real estate product, and had a lot to do with science because of the mechanical systems and all of the intricacies of how it was built. And that you had to sell it through the science because you couldn't do it through the real estate. So I did sign on. I started their life science practice. We grew it to more than 110 people in 2 years and underwrote about $500 million in life science real estate. And then I was recruited to a company where I led the development of 1 million square feet of life science speculative real estate in Manhattan called the East River Science Park. And now I am working on the creation of a very large scientific institute and sequencing center called the New York Genome Center, which will couple translational research with sequencing and bioinformatics, and ultimately, we hope, will transform the way science and healthcare is delivered in the world, not only in New York, but in the world.
Two remarks.
Thank you.
One is, aren't you tired? The second is, if you had that long tube at the age of 19, looking out to the future, what did you imagine? Did you think you were going to get here?
Oh, my God. This has been beyond my wildest imagination. Nobody could have imagined a life like this when I was 19 and had 3 children under the age of 13 months and broke, and nobody could have imagined this. Am I tired? No. I'm always excited by the next opportunity. So keep going.
That's great. Nice to know that you got your start here. Thank you very much.